what does brain fitness actually mean? And how is it different maybe from our perception or idea of traditional mental health?
Well, a lot of people think mental health is a psychological problem. It is to some degree, but it's a physiological problem. People aren't moving and breathing. Our nervous system occupies the whole body, but 70% of it is our brain. So people don't realize that if you don't work out your brain, and working out physically does do that, you create BDNF and it does create neuroplasticity. But brain fitness is being able to move between those physiological states. Let's say you have to run because of something, or you have to fight, or you have to calm down and relax. Is your body willing to do that? One way you know that you don't have the resilience you need is first thing in the morning you need coffee. There's no reason you need coffee first thing in the morning, and I'm going to explain that to the listeners. Because in the morning you wake up with high cortisol, dopamine, norepinephrine, and all these things, all these neurochemicals are waking you up. Now, when you drink a cup of coffee, you just crush that. You just blocked your body's natural ability, because the brain is inherently lazy. So it says, okay, you're going to drink coffee. That's fine. I don't have to make this norepinephrine, cortisol, dopamine, and then what happens is you become dependent upon it. Now, I'm not against coffee. I think you should drink it maybe in your midday, maybe 10 or 11 o'clock, maybe at 2 o'clock in the afternoon if you're going to drink it, because then you can get a lift, because your cortisol level drops when you wake up. By 2 o'clock, your temperature drops 2 degrees and your cortisol level tanks. That's why you don't get much done in the afternoon. We did a Google study, and we were trying to show them because of burnout. A lot of these programmers that after COVID, they went back in the office and they said, hell, I don't want to do this. This is crazy. This is too much stress. And they said, what can you do? And I said, have them do a BrainTap session at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They said, why? I go, because everybody loses 2 degrees. It's a psychological low in the body. If your nervous system is out of balance, if you don't have good brain fitness, you can't bounce back. Your afternoon becomes just, and so what we did, at first they wouldn't do it. I said, give me 2 weeks and I guarantee you'll not stop doing it. At the end of 2 weeks, their sleep score improved 70%, their happiness score 54%. But the biggest thing for Google was 26% more work done on the days they took 20-minute break. So that means, how sharp you are in the morning, you're fresh, whatever. You should be that way all the time. My dad was a Silva instructor, the Silva method. So I grew up teaching me how to use my mind and to do different things. Of course, I used it for sports because I'm a guy, so I used it to become a 3-sport captain, get a college scholarship and all those things. And at the time when I did it in the 70s, we were kind of, Fruit Loops. Nobody ever did any visualizations and relaxation techniques. Although when I went to Ferris State, but when I went to U of M's football camp, Dana Coyne, who held the record at that time of the most extra points ever kicked, he took us all through visualization exercises. And I went, oh, my dad's not full of it. Maybe there is something to that. And so I started using it even more because, when you see these professionals using it, it's a big thing. So a lot of people do some forms of brain fitness, like breathing techniques are a good form of brain fitness, walking, just giving yourself a break away from things they might call mindfulness. What we do, and we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, further on, is we use technology to get the brain into the perfect state to be in these states of visualization. We call it alpha and theta, or your intuitive and inventive mind. You need to be in those states of consciousness to be able to do these things. So that's what we train people to do.
Yeah, it's great. It gives us a lot to unpack here and, walk through throughout this conversation. I have experienced firsthand, about 6 years ago, I went through a complete coffee fast. I did like 60 days without it. Like I was the guy, the coffee pot started like 15 minutes before the alarm clock went off. So it was ready like first thing. And then I got out of it, and now as an athlete, former athlete, like competed in bodybuilding, played sports much like yourself growing up. I look at it now more as a performance enhancer. I think that's kind of what you're saying there, right? Like it shouldn't be the requirement to get your day started. You should be able to pull that lever, like when you need to kind of focus in on something, whether it's physical, mental, cognitively, maybe a session of deep work. It's like, hey, I'm gonna have a little bit of caffeine here. Maybe right before the conversation that I was having with you, like had a small bit of caffeine paired with some other nootropics, just kind of get me in the mental state that I need. So I love that and definitely, experienced it firsthand. You said one sign of peak maybe brain fitness is the ability to move through these physiological states. Can you walk us through what those different physiological states are that we...
Let's say somebody pulls in front of you in traffic. Do you immediately tell them they're number one, get all upset and angry, and this anger stays with you, and the next person you see gets it dumped on them? That's dysregulation. most people don't get stuck in the positive states. They get stuck in the negative states. Like, let's say you get some bad news. Yeah, well, we work with Alex Guerra, Tom Brady's coach, because Tom Brady's a BrainTap user. And I asked him, I said, how did you get Tom to come back, after he threw those interceptions? He said, I told him you get 15 seconds to think about that bad memory and get over it. Because what happens, those quarterbacks, they're in a high pressure situation. They can't take that. They threw an interception. So what? He threw 3 more touchdowns. So it's like, you just got to go out there and make it up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have setbacks. How is your body regulating? Do you get too depressed? And do you get angry at just anything? These are dysregulations of the nerves. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be envious. All these real emotions. The problem is, think of your body. It's a transducer. It holds energy and discharges that energy. So when you're holding that energy, if you're a 90-watt light bulb and you're burning at 110 all the time because your inflammation, these are physical markers, and then you have this emotional outburst. Emotion is energy in motion. But negative emotions, there's one thing they all have in common: no breath. If you notice somebody who's angry, they can't breathe. When you're in love or you're in harmony or you're doing something you really enjoy, you breathe easily. So we teach people how to breathe through. Breathing is a direct connect to your nervous system. And you can alter your nervous system so easily with your breath. So part of the BrainTap training is actually teaching you how to breathe again. Most people hold their breath. Next time you're in a conversation with somebody, notice they hold their breath all the time. And then they go, they'll catch themselves. Well, that's because their primitive brain says, hey, we need some oxygen down here, man. Breathe, and so the brain has to do that. But you can train the brain just like you would as an athlete. You don't, in practice, you might not play at the same level as in the game, but to the degree you can and face all those situations, then we call that neural pruning. So you have brain pruning. So you already have the thoughts in your mind of what you're going to do. Now you get in a game situation, which is life. Life is a game. So if you're playing it at the highest level, you don't want to let other people affect your nervous system by making you angry. And there's a saying, he who angers you conquers you. So if you kind of live your life that way, if you give your power to another. When my kids were younger, it was funny. We used to go on these big vacations because my wife always bragged up her dad's vacation. So I had to beat them, in that. So we'd go on these 6-week vacations and, 2 kids. And so they would argue. And they said, why are you giving her your remote control? So that became the big joke in the house. And they said, what do you mean? I said, if I make you angry, that means I can turn you off. Just point my remote control at you and turn you off. So many people give other people their remote control. And brain regulation means I don't care what you say about me or do about me. It's within me to hold that poise, that confidence. And the days of social media, unfortunately, if everybody lived the life on social media, we wouldn't have a problem. But the problem is that nobody's broadcasting their bad news. They're only, which is good. But then people look at it and they get envious. They start thinking, oh wow, if they're doing it, I should be able to do it. But you are actually in a competition with yourself. There's no one else. This is the one man or one woman sport. And nobody else can run your race. No one else can, sleep your sleep, eat your foods. You're the one keeping score. You can have a lot of coaches, and I think everybody needs a coach, but they can't go on the field and play for you. That's what my coach has always said. I can teach you what to do, but I can't get on the field and play for you. So that's where the brain training comes in. And could you imagine, Frank, going to a movie and they never rehearsed, but they got out there on the screen and you started filming them? Well, people do this every day in their life. They never do any brain priming. So this priming happens where you prime your day. Who are you going to see? What are you going to talk about? How are you going to discuss it? How are you going to end your day? How's your evening going to be? You plan all that out so that the brain, what you think about, you bring about. So as you think about these things, your brain continues to, it's just like buying a new car. I'm sure you've driven off the lot and you said, I didn't know there were this many of these cars out here, because they weren't there's a part of the brain called the default mode network, or the reticular activating system. And it's always scanning your environment for things that you like, things that is this safe? Am I okay? Can I challenge this? Can I, should I run? Should I flee? It's always, now this is something that might shock your listeners, because in 2015, when you talk about superhuman, that's why I thought I'd bring this up. In 2015, they discovered a new part of the human anatomy. Before 2015, no one on earth had a physiology book that had the lymphatic system that went beyond the neck. If you go back into most physiology books, they stop there. But in 2015, they discovered something. They discovered that when you reach level 4 sleep, a part of your body activates like a superhuman and detoxes your brain. If you don't reach that level 4 sleep, now with 2/3 of the world that isn't sleeping, if you're not sleeping, you don't have good brain fitness. You should be able to sleep on any schedule, anywhere, anytime when it's time to sleep. We called it in Silva sleep and wake control. So you can train your brain to do this. It's just a brainwave. It's like turning a dial in your radio. And so when you think about the way in which the body works. Now, one other thing, just since we're going to try to shock the listeners a little bit here. You know, in 2003, they mapped the human genome. You heard that, right? They mapped the genome. Everybody's got DNA kits, and you can find out who your ancestors are and who your illegitimate brothers and sisters are. Whatever you're doing out there, you know, it's all out there now. You know, you find this all out. But the reality is they only map 1% of it. Could you imagine going through college and you want to take your final exams and say, I only answered 1% of the questions. Can I get my degree? No. But in 2018, they discovered something else, something that changed, really rocked the world of science and neuroscience, especially, that every 40 seconds, every DNA pair in your body is changing based on everything, based on the environment, based on the food you consume, the water you drink, the thoughts you think. Mostly the first filter for all of this is your mindset. Do you look at life as a challenge? Is there a setback, something going on, and you fold up like an accordion, or do you step up to it? You know, the old saying is, do you run from the fire, or do you run toward the fire to help the people out? You know, what's your mindset? What they found was people that look at life as an optimist, they actually produce 200 times more light at the cellular level. And why is that important for the listener? Every cell of your body has something called mitochondria. This is not only in the brain or in the eyes. When we use light therapy, it's because hemoglobin absorbs that light energy, circulates it through the body, finds the cell that it's about to die or needs repair. Maybe you just worked out, and it's going to feed that cell light energy. In the middle of that cell, that mitochondria, just imagine a little guy in there with a clock, and every time he moves his hand around, it spits out an ATP. ATP is the currency of the body. Think of it as without that, you can't transact information in the body. So this is what all the foods we consume, all the water we drink, all the air we breathe, that's what we're trying to make. But light bypasses all that. It makes it at the cell. So there's no delivery system. Boom, right there. So what we showed was with light therapy, you can have 32 times more ATP production. So we want to deliver to the brain, because the brain is the central processing unit. It's what moves the muscles. It's what moves the ligaments. It's what moves the bones. You know, you can have big, strong muscles, but if your brain isn't working, who cares? You know, you can live to be 120, but somebody else is, you know, changing your diaper. That doesn't work for me. You know, I want to be able to do those things. So and it's really an energy equation. So when people think about, and that's why exercise, and there's three forms of brain fitness that I always tell people. There's really 4, but I'll mention the 4th just slightly because some people get confused about it. Number 1 is physical movement. You have to move your body. If you don't move your body, and really resistant training is best, because as we age, unfortunately, gravity gets us and we lose muscle. So muscles are little chemical factories that make all those great neurotransmitters we need in our gut, but we need muscles to help them work. Without the muscles, we can't make the serotonin, the dopamine, the GABA, everything we need to flow through the day and have this optimized thinking. Now, when you think about number two is you can't outthink a bad diet. You got to eat right. You know, and what I tell people, they go, what should I eat? What's going to affect my DNA? Everything affects it. So whatever you put in is going to affect it, because it's giving off electrical charge, information in form of proteins, fats, and fiber, hopefully good foods. But if it's bad foods, the body is going to have to rob your body to digest those foods. So you have to start thinking, gosh, is it worth it? And sometimes it is. It's a birthday party, or you're celebrating with family, so you might have a drink or something like that. But it's not all the time. You know, it's something you do occasionally. The body can handle it. But when we get the assault we have on our brains right now, I mean, with my kids also, I told them, I said, you can eat anything you want as long as you can read it. My daughter got really good at reading, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you can't read it, you can't eat it. I always tell people, if it comes in a can, bottle, or wrapper with ingredients you can't read, you can't digest it. It's going to be a toxic load on the body. So Traumas, thoughts, and toxins are the death call of the brain and the body in general. But number 3 is you got to do some kind of brain fitness. That's where breathwork comes in. And we talk about mindfulness. And then for those people that look for rapid change, it's BrainTap. But you can do it. Obviously, what we do is we take all the ancient traditions. In fact, in India, Ames Bhopal, it was funny because I went there and I took a guru up on stage and I measured his brain with EEG. I said, that's a pretty good brain. He's got the perfect brainwave symmetry. I said, anybody here ever never meditate? So the guy raises his hand, I bring him on stage. I put a BrainTap on him. Within 7 minutes, he had the same brain as the guru. And they said, how did you do that? I said, because we don't learn the way you think we learn. We are superhuman in the way we think and breathe. When you learned a language, if someone's listening out there and you've learned more than one language, you have a circuit in your brain that never shut down. That means you can learn a third language better. If you only learned one language, the brain, again, is always trying to conserve energy. It shuts down that circuit. That's why it's so hard to learn languages. We didn't learn languages by looking at a book and repeating words one after the other. We were immersed in that experience, in that theta brain that we have, absorbed that information, and then we sorted it out. We have a 100 billion neural bit processor. What it can do for us is no small thing. What we can do, but we have to tune into it. It will shut down on us if we think it's not good enough, not smart enough, all these negative sayings that people have. I always tell people you shouldn't shit all over yourself. You got to step up and realize, now you can't say this out loud, in public, but in front of the mirror in the morning when you're shaving or whatever you're doing, you should be telling yourself how great you are. Somebody should, and your subconscious needs to hear that. And, you just don't want to say it out loud in front of a group of people because then they think you're egotistical. But you should believe that for your life, your family, your friends, your coworkers, you are the best possible Frank, right? I'm the best possible Patrick. If not, then that's what you're going to work on. When somebody says, what should I work on? I said, if you do an inventory, be honest with yourself. You know what you need to work on, and you just work on the small things, and the big things will take care of themselves.